So I think there's a big difference between musicians and vocalists, and I think you need to approach each of them with their different kind of tact. For me, the big challenge has been doing vocals right. Like, getting into vocal processing is really challenging because the human ear is so acute when it comes to human voices that if something is off, you're going to notice it and it's going to just distract and irritate from the rest of the song. So really making sure that my vocal processing, and that includes everything from like just pitch shifts, small amounts of semitones so that everything is like not even a little bit flat or not even a little bit sharp. That's been a challenge for me. And then also getting out of the idea of using reverbs on vocals has been a kind of an unlearning experience. And so I watched the Seth Drake tutorials a few weeks ago where he processed vocals in this really, really deep way. And he doesn't use any reverb at all. And he says that because reverb is such like a smeary kind of effect, it causes all kinds of weird phase cancellation. And so to get that really high quality, poppy, professional polish on a voice, he recommends just using many layers of slapback delay. And so I've been experimenting with that using like my finest, nicest, most expensive delays. And the results have been tedious to get to where I want them to be. But when I've gotten there, I think that the result is much, much more polished than anything I've done before.
That's crazy. I would have imagined with especially slapback delays, because they're in that millisecond range where they can cause phasing, that would be a bigger culprit of phasing than reverb. But I'm really intrigued now to watch that and to experiment with that.
So that's in the approach by Seth Drake. It's under the best practices section, but he does like a 2-part tutorial on just vocals, and he really puts all of those techniques to use. It blew my mind because, you know, vocals sound so good under reverb, and I come from like an indie rock reggae background, and so a lot of reverb will take up space and help the track occupy more time and more space, help the vocal track occupy more time and more space inside the mix. So to step away from using reverb was like really counterintuitive, and I thought the bone dry delayed aspect of it all was kind of weird. But once you start doing like 4 or 5 parallel channels of like slightly variable millisecond delay intervals, you get this really cool layered, deep, rich kind of sound that doesn't come from just a plain reverb. So when I'm saying like slapback delays, I'm doing different time signatures from the right to the left, so there's a little bit of a Haas effect and they're widening, but then I'll do like 4 or 5 different delays doing that same kind of thing. So maybe the first one right will be 17 milliseconds and left will be 6. And the second time will be a slightly different kind of delay with like, instead of a tape delay, maybe a sort of transmitter delay or a radio vocal kind of delay, like slightly different flavors. And I will EQ out the highs or EQ out the lows. So there's just like certain frequencies that aren't stacking up the same, and then give that a different temporal setting. So maybe like 15 seconds on the left and 32 seconds on the right. And what happens is all these different stacks become this one really crazy layered sort of rich mechanical kind of vocal. It sounds very much like sounds like the Hollywood version of what a vocal should sound like. It's just really, really high fidelity and clear and sharp, but really wide too. And then I compress the fuck out of it, and it seems to be doing. It seems to be okay. I seem to be liking it, so we'll see where we go from there.
Kind of a modern take on build your own chorus effect, and it definitely when he was doing that, it really reminded me of, you know, some of the Justin Timberlake tracks that are out, or Justin Bieber, like these big, you know, like extremely well produced, Post Malone even, like where the vocal just shines and shimmers and sits on top of everything effortlessly.
So I got some Post Malone stems a few months ago and was just listening to just the voices, and that was part of what made me or clued me in on this is those Post Malone vocals have like 15 layers, and one of them is just like an ambient layer of him humming with a shit ton of reverb on it, but then the vocals are embedded into that layer even more. It's that whole, I mean, his whole appeal is his voice. And so they spend probably more than half the time making sure that those vocals are flawless. And I think that, you know, humans being egomaniacs are so attracted to the human voice. We prize that over any other instrument sound. So it's important to get that right, at least for me and from where I'm sitting. So yeah, I don't know. I want my tracks to have timelessness in the sense that I will not feel I will not ever be disappointed about playing them out for people 10 years, 15 years down the line from now. So if I'm going to put out anything, I want to stretch for the stars and have it be like the best that I'm able to. I want to play to the top of my intelligence. And then hopefully that will give it some sort of longevity. So 15 years from now, I can look back and be like, you know what? I'm so much better than I was in 2020, but it's still a good song. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say a few things. First of all, it's rare that there is a section in this podcast that I'm so fucking excited to go back and listen to that again and try and apply that to my stuff. But that section on the slapback delays you just explained so choicely. I really am excited to come back and watch this video about just that and apply it. Secondly, I'm so glad you mentioned the timeless quality. That is something that I feel like a lot of people making electronic music, it's so easy to get caught up in genre trends or, banger culture, right? And the issue with banger culture is that it's sterile and forgettable. Well, not forgettable, but replaceable. Mm-hmm. It's replaceable, right? Like insert other 20 tracks here that you can play at the show and everyone will have the same pretty good reaction. But one of the things that I really align with you on is if it's not going to be timeless, like I don't necessarily feel inclined to release it. Like I'm moving forward with the project that I'm doing now. That was one of the key tenets. It's like, I have to be so happy to play this 10 years from now as I am today, or else it just doesn't pass that bar. Right. Moving kind of backwards, one section, one thing that I like, but the main thing that I wanted to ask you today, which I'm glad that you brought up, is something that I've noticed that you have been doing, which you explained, working with a bunch of different vocalists that are all super professional sounding, super choice vocal styles in a wide range. And this is also something that a lot of people don't ever really talk about or explain how to access this type of thing. So I was wondering if you would go into as much detail as you feel comfortable with, like how you find vocalists, like roughly how much it costs, if you're willing to divulge that, and like kind of how that process works for you.
So yeah, that's really great. Whenever I reach out to a vocalist, I make sure my track, as Luke knows, I make sure my track is like as close to being ready for the vocal recording as possible. I don't want to present them something that's half formed in amorphous and is going to change down the line as you process it more. So I get the musicality done as close to being finished as I possibly can. And as I'm doing that, I'll often think of like lyrics or poems or kind of melodies that would fit with it. And then when I reach out to vocalists, for this woman, Eva, who is doing the first centerpiece of the new EP, the first song on it, I got in touch with her just through a mutual friend who had offered to work with her before, and they didn't ever do anything. And I was like, do you think it'd be weird if I reached out to her? He's like, no, of course not. So I just emailed her. She got back to me in a few days, and she wanted to work for free. But I was like, you really shouldn't, and you should prioritize your own voice. You should value your own voice in a dollar amount, because music has to be sustainable. And to be sustainable professionally, it means you have to feed yourself. You have to be able to sustain yourself doing this. So I gave her $200. I think it took her probably she said it only took her a couple of hours, but we did do a couple of Zoom meetings back and forth. She presented a rough draft. She did a really, really rough take over the recording, sent it back to me. I was like, I like the melody, but these words are a little bit too teenage. I want some mature kind of poetry. So I sent it back to her. We revamped the poetry, and then she got me another edition. I processed it, and that one was pretty quick. I have a lot of ins in the Hawaiian music scene, or the music scene in Hawaii, which is where I'm from. I played music there for 10 years, just in different bands and stuff. So I know a bunch of people in the scene, and was able to email old friends and be like, yo, remember that soul singer that we opened for that one time? Can I get his number? And I was able to do that. But really, it's just kind of like being really kind, being really nice, and reaching out to people as politely and as you don't want to be domineering, and you also don't want to be pushy. Like if you're going to reach out to somebody, a vocalist, be like, hey, I'm really interested in this. Here's some of my work, some of my prior work that I've done before. I'd really love to work with you on this. And if so, if you're interested, email me back. There's some money in this for both of us. And then I also think too that COVID has like made the music community, we're all having to reevaluate where our money is going to come from. So for people who might not be working right now, I think they're happy for an opportunity to record with up and coming artists in order to make a little bit of extra cash. So I guess my main point is like, make sure your music is like danceable, or that they can figure it out with one listen and know what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And then when you approach them, just be really kind and let them know right off the bat that that is the amount that you can pay them. So speaking with Sixth Street's fabulous vocalist of a girlfriend, she wanted to do, she has a flat rate, which is a hefty sum, but she's very talented. She definitely deserves that flat rate. And then if you want to add on things like, I would like to get some harmonies, or I would like you to write, I would like you to sing my melody, she charges a little bit more for both of those things, as opposed to coming up with her own melody and her own words. So it's kind of a case-by-case basis.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, that's super helpful information. And I think that the key here is that you have relationships that you've fostered over the years, and you're not afraid to reach out and make those secondhand, third-hand connections in order to get to the opportunity to ask someone to work with them. And then the second key, value that person like they know that they are worth it.
For sure.
Don't hit them up and be like, hey, like, I'm popping right now. Like, if you do this song, you'll be famous. Like, let's do this. Like, no, you got to be professional. You got to be willing to pay them for their time. And I think that I'm really impressed with your ability to have so many connections with different vocalists. I think that speaks to how that you're doing it the right way, you know?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head with this idea of enduring relationships. Like, you should have enduring relationships in any relationship if it's going to be a meaningful one. If you're going to have a relationship where it's parasitic and you're taking from others and exploiting the fuck out of them, there's not going to be any reason for them to want to continue to work with you in the future. So treat everyone like they're a potential collab. But when you actually find people that you're going to potentially collaborate with, you don't leave a taste of bitterness in their mouths when they talk about you. You should be able to give them the kind of feedback in the notes that isn't going to be derogatory, like, oh, your voice sucks. I need a 10%, or I need a 10 energy performance and not a 4 energy performance. You need to step up the energy. Those kinds of notes aren't going to get you very far. Whenever you're trying to give somebody feedback or critique, do it in a gentle way. This is their art form too. You don't want to shit all over them.
Yeah. I was going to ask you to touch on that. So can you go a little deeper and like you mentioned briefly the specific feedback that you gave about the lyrics, but in general, what kinds of ways and what kinds of phrasing do you like to give an artist? Because as we all know, critiques can hurt, and especially for us artistic folks who spend a lot of time on something, you know, you want to make sure to soften that blow and present it in a way that is, palatable and actionable. So speak on that. What ways have you found that are really helpful for you to get that action that you need while maintaining the goodwill in the relationship?
So I think there's a big difference between musicians and vocalists, and I think you need to approach each of them with their different kind of tact. For instance, a musician isn't so attached to their guitar line that you could say something like, oh, can you do 16th note arpeggios instead of 8th note arpeggios? That's not going to hurt their feelings because they're able to do that and they're happy to get you what you want. Vocalists, on the other hand, this is like their voice. And so a criticism might be taken as an identity criticism as opposed to just an artisanal or choice criticism. Like, I'm criticizing that particular choice as opposed to I'm criticizing you as an artist and your voice as an instrument. So you got to be really careful about saying things about the actual quality of their vocal cords, because this is what they sing to. I mean, they sing to themselves in the shower. They sing to themselves in the car on the way to work. They love their own voice. Vocalists are very much divas, and so you don't want to step on the quality of their voice. So I try and, whenever I'm trying to get to a place with an artist, I'll say things, with a vocal artist, I'll say things that are a little bit more geared towards the choice that they're making. Like, and also the compliment sandwich, that goes so far. Give them the compliment, give them the critique, and then give them another compliment. I find that working with professional vocalists, though, they tend to not be so absorbed with their own voices that they can take the feedback in a constructive way, but still just being very gentle and being very aware that this is this person's instrument. It's not like a guitarist who can, they can just change the tempo or the bend frequency of their finger or whatever. So when I give people feedback to get more what I want, I'd say things like, I love where you're going with this. I would really like to hear a full diaphragm kind of vowel, as opposed to like something that's in the higher register. I want to hear something that's full diaphragm. Or I'll try and ask them, like, I want you to throw your voice to the far corner of the room. So if I want you to sing to the furthest corner in your room, so that way I'm going to get a louder, more projected vocal without saying I need more energy because you sound kind of weak and floppy. So when you say things like that, when you just try and find other ways to get what you want out of them, I think it'll work better for both parties. But you know what? Sometimes it's just like, I like the idea, but this melody is just contradictory. It's just not working with, like Rick Kenny said, it's just not working with this fucking bass line. I need you to do it better. I talked to that dude. I talked to my vocalist, Evan, and he's like, I completely hear what you mean. I totally get it. So he's going to redo the vocals for me. But still a little bit discouraging because I spent 30 hours plus processing those vocals and they're not working out. So, you live in
the good news is that chain still exists and it works on that voice. There's a good chance you can plunk the new vocal right in there and just like, let me just tweak this a little bit. Save that rack.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Save all your racks if you can. Save all your work. Yeah.
I like it. What's up, humans? It's Luke, your friendly neighborhood trap Jesus. Thank you so much for watching our videos. We appreciate you. Remember to like and subscribe to our channels. And if you have any questions or topics that we need to cover on the show, put them in the comments. Appreciate you. Peace and peace among worlds.